Greetings dear students, researchers and teachers watching this module on Program Planning for Development or Plan Change, Concept, Importance, Types and Implications. At the end of this module on UGC's E-Pathshala, the students will be acquainted with the concepts and importance of planning programs for development or change. They will be able to understand various types of programs for development or plan change and their implications, and finally will be able to select the most appropriate change process while planning programs for development or change. The modern world today is in throes of rapid change. To live harmoniously, man has to actively engage in the process of change. The dynamic systems of the society, viz., the individual, group, organization and community continually keep on changing. The dynamic systems of the human society have to change in order to adapt and adopt the innovation. Changes in these systems are a must. Change is in fact a survival tactic for the dynamic systems of the society. Change or perish is the rationale for unrelenting change. Alvin Toffler, an eminent futurist, maintains that there is a need to constantly adapt and change to situations, otherwise feelings of helplessness, despair, depression, uncertainty, insecurity, anxiety and burnout sets in. When we talk of change, planning becomes very vital and important. It helps in designing change process. Planning is in fact the key to any process of change. Planning for development or change is a systematic, well-construed, progressive and a step-by-step process. Efficient planning is that which, under given condition, leads to maximization of the attainment of relevant ends. Meyerson and Banfield in 1935 defined planning as designing a course of action to achieve goals. In this context, it is important to know about planning programs for development or change, its concept, why is change important, its various types and also its implications. Next, we will discuss the concept and importance of planning programs for development or change, its concept, importance, types and implications. Planning goes in every aspect of life. Planning is essential for any systematic attempt to achieve desired goals. Planning must therefore result in programs that help people to find more satisfactory modes of living and of making a living. Planning is well accepted in our culture and is regarded as an integral and important dimension of our culture's rational value orientation. Almost everyone accepts the premise of planning, that it is important and necessary for individuals, for families and even for business organizations. As teachers, we plan our lectures every day. As homemakers, we plan how to keep the house in order and running. Planning may be a simple process, that is, planning a holiday, or rather complex, that is, planning a long-range comprehensive plan for social and economic development of a community and even the nation. Planning for development or change is a progressive process. Defining goals is a basic part of planning. Without some express purpose, there can be no planning. Planning entails a series of quick decisions about the nature, scope and objective of change. It is akin to developing the blueprint for action. In democratic societies, planners do not just set goals alone. Rather, they aid the people in defining these goals. One of the prerequisites to democratic planning is awakening of people. According to Pearson, People, when provided with real facts of the situation and with good leadership, will identify the more critical problems with which they are faced. Planning for development or change is a social process as it affects others. Planning is a social process as it involves some kind of interaction among various dynamic systems of the society, that is the individual, group, organization and community. According to Bennis, planned change is an aspect of social change. Social planning is conscious, collaborative, interactional process combining investigation, discussion, agreement and action which leads to social change using appropriate methods to be used to reach these goals and keeping individual and societal values intact. It is important to plan programs for development or change for the following reasons. The first is to minimize wastage of resources, that is both time as well as money. Second is to provide guidance, so to what is to be done, why, with what objectives, so that they can give direction for execution of work and for evaluation of results. Planning gives continuity to the program as the plan is available in black and white. And if for some reason there is change of personnel, it will not affect the tempo or even the direction of change process. A thorough program plan gives reliable information about its progress, situation and resources available from the records. The fifth important point is institutional support from public bodies, civic authorities and key personnel is a must for proper implementation and success of plan. Next, planning is one of the best methods of developing leadership, which is one of the keys to success. Many conflicts like conflict of resources, conflict of personalities may arise while executing a program. These can all be envisaged and anticipated and easily removed at the planning stage itself. A good program planning process will avoid unnecessary conflicts. For any program of development or change to achieve its goals should be based on needs of the local people, and then only their cooperation and support can be elicited. Next point is that a good planning always identifies and monitors future problems and developments that will have a major impact on the performance of results. We will now examine the various types of change processes. We are now going to discuss the typology of the change processes. All change is not planned change. How then should one distinguish between or interrelate planned change from other forms of human change? The contemporary debate today is focused on whether the change is planned change or it is unplanned change. The methods employed in directing and controlling these forces of change is another question that is frequently asked. Unplanned change is an unanticipated, sudden surprise within the system. For example, a family or an organization due to death of a head of the family or resignation of the CEO company, it leads to the chaos of the family or the organization. It can lead to disruption, loss of client and even poor product performance. Let's examine how is planned change different from unplanned change. Planned change is deliberate, well thought, intentional and goal oriented activity. In spite of all planning and systematic implementation of plan, planned change tends to occur in a disruptive and chaotic manner. While the external environment, whether it is competitive, regulatory or others, will continue to put pressure to perform and deliver goods and services on time, the internal forces will inhibit this delivery unless the system quickly adapts. This adaptation in the internal environment include strategic change, changes in the mission statement of the organization, redesigning of the structure of the company so it meets the client's needs, process oriented changes, or simply how the company assemble goods and delivers services, and the people centered changes, that is altering their attitudes, behaviors and even skills. Planned change is a deliberate design and implementation of a structural innovation which may be a new policy or a goal, or a change in the work ethics and philosophy, and even the work climate and style. The process of planned change is a complex process. Planned change within the organization is closely interrelated and entails changes in technology, task, structure and even people. When a major organizational change is required, considerable planning goes in effecting change. The change is successful if it proceeds in a sequential manner, right from identifying the need for change to identifying elements to be changed, planning for change, assessing change forces and the action for change. Let us now examine these various types of change and their implications in the planning programs for development or change one by one. We first begin with indoctrination. Indoctrinate simply means to brainwash people. Indoctrination is implicit in parent-child relationship and has an essential function in forming stable communities of shared value. Humans are social animals and are shaped by the culture and tradition of societies of which they are a part. Indoctrination involves mutual goal setting and is deliberate and involves an imbalanced power ratio. Many schools, prisons and mental hospitals or other total institutions would fall into this category. These institutions wield all power and shape changes while students, prisoners, patients have no power. The next change is coercive change. Coercive means using force or threats. Coercive change is characterized by non-mutual goal setting. Here the goals are set only by one side, that results in imbalanced power ratio and one-sided deliberateness. Coercive change may be exemplified by thought control and brainwashing practices of the fascists. In this type of change, there is little or no opportunity to engage in any kind of mutual goal setting. The deliberateness originates from one party, the change agent, and the client system is coerced into change. Now, the difference between indoctrination and coercive change is rather elusive and complex. Let us compare a patient in a progressive mental hospital where emphasis is on psychoanalytic theory as opposed to the custodial orientation with that of a prisoner of war or POW captured during war between two nations. The prisoner of war is placed in a prison camp. A patient is legally committed in the mental hospital and the administrator of the hospital wields as much power as prisoner of war commandant. The patient is forced to undergo some form of treatment. There is little choice for him. On the face of it, the similarities seem more important in this example than the differences. However, there are two differences which may possibly distinguish coercive change from indoctrination. In the mental hospital, the patient is allowed and even encouraged to express any form of antisocial feelings up to the point of acting them. The psychotherapeutic procedures followed in the hospital encourage thoughts in exchange for action. It is doubtful that the prisoner of war commandant would encourage even verbal statements that are not in conformance with the accepted ideology, except in situation where the prisoner is presumably confessing. Another difference is that psychotherapists, especially in the early stages of psychotherapy, would attempt to develop a collaborative and interactional relationship, and wherever possible encourage this type of relationship. Still, when all is said and done, coercive change is practiced by the extreme fundamental ideological groups like the fascists, and indoctrination is practiced by mental hospitals, for example, may actually share similar processes and employ identical techniques. But one has to keep in mind that this paradigm, like all paradigms, creates an ideal and abstract model to which actual empirical occurrences do not neatly conform. Third change is the technocratic change. Technocratic means relating to or characterized by the government or control of society or industry by an elite of technical experts. Technocratic change is change ushered by governance where change agents or decision makers are selected on the basis of their technological knowledge. It may be distinguished from planned change by the nature of the goal setting. The use of technocratic means to bring about change relies solely on collecting and interpreting data. Technocratic change follows primarily an engineering model. The client defines his difficulties as deriving from inadequate knowledge and assumes that his lack of knowledge is accidental or a matter of neglect and not something that is functionally a part of him. The technocrat colludes in this assumption and merely makes and reports his findings. An equal power ratio exists between the change agents or the decision makers and the client system. The fourth change is interactional change. Interactional change is characterized by mutual goal setting, and there is fairly equal power distribution between the change agents and the client system, but no deliberateness on either side of the relationship. Although unconsciously either may be committed to change, other in some direction, such changes can be observed among good friends who help each other, married couples, and in various other non-deliberate transactions among people. Change occurs in such transactions possibly with beneficial effects and outcomes, but there is a lack of self-consciousness about it, thus a lack of any definite change agent client relationship. We next examine socialization change. Socialization, according to Clausen, is the process by which man becomes a human being by internalizing norms, values, traditions, customs of the social group of which an individual is a part. Socialization change has a direct kinship with the interactional hierarchical control. Parent-child relationships would be the most obvious example, although counselor-camper, teacher-pupil relationships would also be applicable here. Greater deliberateness on the adult side of the relationship brings specific cases of socialization into the indoctrination or planned change categories. Next is emulative change. Emulate means imitate with effort to equal or surpass or to try to equal or excel. This change process is associated with formal organizations where there is a clear-cut superior subordinate relationship. This closely resembles Kelman's concept of influence through identification. Change is brought about possibly unconsciously through a form of identification with the imitation or emulation of the power figures by the subordinates. Our next change is natural change. Natural change refers to changes brought about with no apparent deliberateness and no goal setting on the part of those involved in it. Primarily, it is residual category encompassing all accidents, quirks of fate, natural disasters, death resulting in unanticipated consequences and changes wrought in connection with the cataclysms such as earthquakes, floods, disasters, etc. It may be that this category includes the operation of all those factors and causes which our limited knowledge cannot properly decipher. Next, we examine planned change. Planned change entails mutual goal setting by one or both the parties, an equal power ratio and deliberateness, eventually at least on the part of both sides, the change agents and the client system. Planned change is well construed, well thought of, deliberate design and implementation of a structural innovation which may be a new policy or a goal or a change in the work ethics and philosophy. Even changes in work climate and style is part of planned change. Planned change has a definite direction. This kind of change occurs as a result of strategic, systematic planning, reorganization and implementation of change. The change agents in the process of planned change steer the client system towards adapting and adopting changes ushered in by innovation. The typology by Bennis is both too crude and too pure and may have difficulty to provide ready linkages to empirical reality. The distinctions made in it are somewhat arbitrary and certainly not all inclusive. However, Bennis's typology definitely provides suggestion as to how planned change can be distinguished from other change processes. It is important to know various types of change so that a suitable change process may be selected and an appropriate program may be planned for inducing development or change in the dynamic system. In the last part, let us conclude what we have learned through this module. The modern world today is in throes of rapid change. This leads to changes in all aspects of human society, that is relationships, environment, be it physical, biological, social, cultural, ecological and even technological. The pace of change is phenomenal and it occurs continuously and ceaselessly. Change may usher in chaos, a disarray, disorganization, pain and even confusion, but it is necessary for evolution. In this context, it is important to know about concept, importance, various types of change and their implications while planning programs for development or change. Planning is important in every aspect of life. It is essential for any systematic attempt to achieve desired goals. Planning for development or change is a social process as it affects others. It is also a conscious, collaborative, interactional process. The process of planned change is a complex process. There are 8 types of change that distinguish planned change from other forms of human change. They are indoctrinational change, socialization change, interactional change, coercive change, emulative change, technocratic change, natural change and finally the planned change. It is important to know various types of change, the power distribution implicit in that change between the change agents and the client system so that a suitable change process may be selected and an appropriate program may be planned for inducing development or change in the dynamic system.